After meeting the massive fist of Luffy, Kaido continues to sink and plummet deeper and deeper below the surface, even reverting back to his humanoid form. Now, the hole made by Kaido's body was comparable to the one created by Big Mom upon her defeat, and historically, Luffy's triumph over major adversaries tend to have environmental and or societal implications as well. Luffy is not only beating down an enemy, but the status quo itself. His actions are liberating and bring about lasting change, and I don't imagine this particular victory to be any different. As we can see, next to the linear lines of depression created by the bodies of the Yonko are several jagged breaks, the likes of which have been crudely depicted to now be connected to the bodies of water responsible for the ever-famed Waterfall of Wano. As a result of this occurrence, I'd imagine that the waterfall itself may very well be on the verge of collapse, therefore allowing for an easier means of entry into the country, as in essence, Luffy, aka Joy Boy, will have opened Wano's borders himself. And as interesting as this may be, with a ton of implications for the future, the outlook of the Shogun to be may be contradictory to this change, but more on that later. With Luffy now unconscious and falling from the sky, Yamato would call out to him and rush to the man's aid. The true victor of this conflict has been decided. Yamato successfully managed to catch Luffy and couldn't help but smile in the face of this major accomplishment. Momonosuke too was at this point unconscious, as the people of Wano continued in their blissful obliviousness. Yamato would then congratulate the two heroes, expressing disbelief all throughout, as meanwhile in the capital, the festival was winding down to its conclusion. Toko here was urging the lanterns on as Tengu Yama remained looking on in silence. We would then flash back to a conversation between the two that took place earlier on in the festival. Toko, as she painted on her lantern, will call out to Tengu and say to him that she had heard a person say that her father knew he'd be killed because in the past he was a pretty major figure. But Toko could not understand why her father let himself be caught despite this, which widened Tengu's eyes as he recalled the death of the great man, as he proclaimed that Ebisu Town's friendly residential oddball would be making his grand final journey. Tengu would then explain to Toko that her father gave his life for the sake of providing the country with one final chance, that if he hadn't done so, the embers of hope entrusted onto them by the late Odin would have been extinguished in an instant, that he sacrificed himself for the future. And man, this next part really hit me. I mean, her dad's execution hit different, and this only made it that much more painful. The fact that upon realizing that his daughter had eaten the remains of a defective smile fruit, he decided to do the very same so she wouldn't have to endure its effects alone. As from there, the two continued to smile on together. I mean, this is actually tear-inducing. Tengu would then express to Toko that her father hoped that one day she would be able to live happily. The little girl would then question if what her father had done was for her, which Tengu would confirm. This would then prompt her to alter her message. She'd ask for Tengu's opinion on the change, the likes of which brought not only him, but many fans to tears as well. As for a samurai, there is no greater honor, as we would see Toko's message be altered in the most touching way possible, now simply expressing her gratitude for his sacrifice. And man, what a beautiful festival this has been. And as it was going on, Nekomamushi would take notice and enjoy the nostalgia of the Fire Festival, and from there, he'd call out to everyone on the interior, letting it be known that Luffy had successfully plunged Kaido into the ground. Not only that, but the fact that Lord Momonosuke, with the use of his dragon form, kept Onigashima from crash landing, a fact which he had confirmed with Yamato. Pretty much everyone had seen the pink dragon, but most had no idea that this was Momonosuke himself. And with that, they had done it. They had won. They had done the impossible and taken down two emperors of the sea. The 20 years of Wano's suffering has now finally concluded. A bunch of our characters would be shown here, but Appo in particular would yell out in disbelief that Luffy had managed to take down Kaido. And this, I imagine, is a big deal because we know about his connection to Big News Morgans, and what a major headline that will end up being. We would continue to see our many forces and allies continue to rejoice in response to this news. From there, Chopper would be overwhelmed with the need for medical aid, but would thankfully be lent a hand. To follow this, we would have Momonosuke waking up as he'd call out to Zunisha. Here, he'd express that after thinking things over for a while, he'd ultimately decide not to open the borders of Wano just yet. He doesn't say he'll never do it, but not right now. He is still very much concerned for the safety of his people, and as such, feels that keeping things closed for the time being will be for the best. And in hearing this, Zunisha would agree to follow the lead of Momonosuke and trust his judgment. Momo would then thank him and apologize in the same breath. However, Momo would begin to feel some pretty major tremors that he considered to perhaps be an earthquake. But going back to what we had said previously, unbeknownst to Momo, this is likely the borders being opened up against his wishes. Understand that in the world of One Piece, there are several major locations that are independent and capable of largely avoiding the world government's control and or influence. The likes of Skypiea, Fishman Island, Elbaf, and so on. The primary means of which tends to be by way of isolation, geologically and or militaristically. and this is for better or for worse really. However, with the story nearing its final stages, these barriers will continue to fall and eventually lead us to a far more connected world. A freedom these people long for whether they truly realize it or not. The heralding of the birth by the Skypeans or the longing for sunlight felt by the fishmen. Wano doing so at all sets a major precedent for the future, which is only further compounded by the fact that Luffy, as Joy Boy, has been the one to usher in such a change by triumphing against the most wanted man in the world. And so despite Momonosuke's reluctance, I for one very much believe Wano is ready to triumphantly march onwards into the future, moving to the beat of the drums of liberation. But moving on, several Beast Pirate stragglers would yell out in refusal of defeat, believing themselves to still have the numbers advantage. As they shot their cannons at the otherwise jovial crowd, they demand the surrender of the samurai. They simply could not believe that Kaido had lost. Now Frankie was still about that action and ready to fight, as according to him, he still had plenty of fuel left in the tank, as Brook attempted to hold him back. From which point Yamato would respond to the remaining Beast Pirates by saying that their lives had already been spared once. Yamato would speak as if aligned with the samurai, which was in fact the reality. Yamato would let it be known that their general Momonosuke had stopped Onigashima from crash landing, and that if the Beast Pirates continued to fight after being saved by the true victors, then Yamato would be sure to personally take them down. And from there, they too would begin to feel the so-called earthquake. Big Mom and Kaido would then move through the magma pool. Although upon closer inspection, this shot doesn't actually seem to have Big Mom in it, but instead Kaido's jacket thing. But then shifting to the prison mines, the sizing movements would be felt here as well. Furthermore, there was unusual activity to be observed on the surface of the sea. A major explosion would then be noticed, as it was believed to be an underwater volcanic eruption. As we may assume, Kaido and Big Mom may be getting team rocketed elsewhere. Meanwhile, still in the midst of his slumber, our victor, Luffy, would have a little smile on his face. The people of Wano would then take notice of this explosion. They'd wonder if Kaido's forces were up to something, as just then, Momonosuke in his dragon form would fly overhead telling them not to fear, as everything was now under control. However, understandably, the people would presume this draconic visage to belong to their longtime tyrant, Kaido, a sight which thoroughly alarmed them, as this was supposed to be the one day of the year in which they could feel free. But again, like a biblically accurate angel, Momonosuke would tell the scattered people of Wano not to fear him, then proclaiming that the eruption they had witnessed was the final send-off of the supreme commander of the Beast Pirates. The people would then halt in confusion, which would be followed by Momonosuke's descent and transformation. A shroud of smoke would then obscure the visages of these heroes, as to the shock of many, the first figure to be revealed would be the fair maiden Komurasaki, whom they believed to have perished, going as far as to consider her to perhaps be a ghost. However, her beauty was unmistakably genuine, and wait until they know of her true identity as the daughter of Lord Odin. Just like how Denjiro was able to appreciate her resilience in the face of certain adversity, and furthermore serving the man who had betrayed her father and was largely responsible for his death, I bet the people will praise her all the same. But speaking of Denjiro, the one they knew to be Kyoshiro would then be the second figure revealed. However, the people would wonder where his signature pompadour hairstyle was, and as such, a long explanation was certainly necessary. However, before then, he felt the need to present to the people the new shogun of Wano. Change is here, and it looks like with the next chapter we will finally be able to see the new appearance of an aged Momonosuke, which is really exciting. Based on the sentiments of Shinobu, it is to be presumed that Momonosuke looks really similar to Odin, so I am willing to bet that the people will be absolutely floored when they see him. Their rejoicing during the Fire Festival was oh so touching. But rather than clinging on to what little hope remained in their hearts for the future, now they should be able to claim the future of Wano for themselves. And after the cruelty that they have collectively endured, I am oh so happy for them. If anything, the festival is only just getting started, because it is bound to be party time. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.